All right. Give it a minute, and then let me post it to my Facebook, and we'll be good to go.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Yep. All right, copy. Let's go over here. Boom, boom, boom.
Been mixing all day.
What's that?
Been mixing all day.
Yeah, yeah. I've been doing a lot of video editing, so the
Very
effect that it's had on your ear, or mixing has on your ears, video editing has on my eyes. So
good. Yeah.
I
After, after it's the same thing. You're like you do. So you've been video editing all day, and now you create more content to edit later.
yep,
Yeah.
pretty much. That's exactly what happens. All right, that'll deal with later. Uh, all right, we should be good to go. Oh, come on, post. There it goes. All right, awesome. Let me make sure we're recording, and we'll be good to go. All right, cool. All right, you good to go?
I'm all set.
All right, awesome. Welcome, everybody, to another live and amplified livecast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we're back at it again with another amazing podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Matt Smith. How's it going today, Matt?
Good. How you doing, Tom?
Doing really good. I moved my interface, and it's kind of in this awkward position where I was trying to bring the audio down a little bit, and I was just like, "Oh, I got to reach over the boom mic now."
You're
And
doing anything? Who knows what you're doing off camera over there, Tom? I have no idea what you're doing.
but first off, welcome to the podcast. I want to thank you so much for giving us the time to sit down and chat a little bit. I'm really excited to kind of get to know you, or get to know more about you. I know you got a lot of really cool and interesting things that you do. You just released a whole bunch of music back in September, so much so that I thought it was a typo when they put in the little information form, and I thought so. We'll definitely be getting into that here in a little bit,
Okay.
but before we kind of jump into everything, uh, for the people that don't know who you are, what's your origin story? What got you into music? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
All right. I've been doing this my whole life. Ever since I was a kid, when I first started playing, I just never put it down. Started at 10 with guitar. Uh, Hit the road at 17 and spent many, many years traveling nonstop, and in bands and stuff and the usual thing. And then I moved to New York City. I come from upstate New York, basically the Albany, Saratoga area. And then I moved to New York City for about 15 years before I moved to Austin. So I spent a lot of time in New York. During that time, I was traveling all over Europe and all over the United States, doing all kinds of stuff, gigs, doing guitar clinics. I've always been teaching, doing master classes and clinics and performances and stuff. So for a long time, and then just had enough of that. Came down here because my mom and dad lived in Austin, and I wanted to spend some time with them while they're still around. So that's why I moved down here, and it was a great move for me to
Yeah,
get out of New York, obviously. So
yeah. I mean, I moved to Waco about a year ago, and I'm really enjoying the Central Texas scene. I haven't gotten to see much of the music yet because I moved here the end of October of 2019. And so it was like right at the beginning of the Christmas holidays. So it's like everybody's busy doing holiday stuff, and then January hits and it's like, okay, I got a couple of weeks to start looking at some stuff, and then boom, the pandemic hit, and I was like,
I remember it was the time changed, and so
yeah,
did the world.
yeah,
It was like that. I always remember it was like the time changed, and then so did everything else. It was amazing. And
yep,
who would have thought then it would last this long and will continue to last this long? The beautiful thing about that, though, is there's a silver lining to all of this stuff. And you remember after the plague, there was the Renaissance.
mm-hmm,
So what happens anytime that you have a giant kind of civilization changing event like a pandemic, people who are creative, they'll spend maybe a couple of months kind of trying to figure stuff out. And then they're like, well, I'm not gigging, so I better start writing music.
yep,
And so we're going to see a giant avalanche
oh
of
yes,
it's
yep,
already starting to happen. I
yeah.
mean, and because that's what you do. If you're not, you have to do something with the creativity.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been saying that since probably April. Like, I mean, because I've been doing the podcast now for 4 years. Yeah, July was 4 years. Um, and we've been kind of doing it more daily since the pandemic, because it's like, well, I can't get out, and we do live acoustic sessions with musicians
Mhm.
as kind of like, that's what we started as. And once the pandemic hit, it was just kind of like, well, we got to do something. There's this Zoom thing, let's just start doing remote podcasting, and we'll make it work. And as I'm talking to all these musicians, it's like, it's interesting because they're all in different places. You got like ones that they have their own studios, they can go in, record whenever they want, and just kind of continually release music. Some people are writing, they can't record. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens 6, 12, 18 months after the pandemic, as people start getting their music recorded, getting it mixed, mastered, sent out, and all that stuff. There's going to be some amazing stuff coming out.
Well, as they always say, Tom, you too can make hundreds or even tens of dollars in the music industry over just a few short decades. It's not, anyway, so this is a labor of love for everyone
Yeah.
who's involved in it. And people, it's interesting. There was a time when you started to realize that music went from a sale unit to a promotional thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then what's that for? To do gigs. And all of a sudden, well, you make records so you could get better gigs and hopefully get more, more press and better gigs and everything. And then all of a sudden, there's no gigs. So, what do? You go back and make more records and kind of stock them up for when there are gigs eventually,
Yeah.
because it'll eventually, it's eventually there'll be a vaccine and all this will be behind us, and
Yeah.
then we'll have to figure it out. In the meantime, it's interesting, like you have found a new way to do things,
Yep.
a new way, and you're using your creative energy.
Yep.
A friend of mine told me one time, he said, every morning you wake up and you have like a $20 bill of creativity by your dresser. That's what you get that day. And if you use your $20 bill, then it's done. So if you use it on doing whatever you're going to do, maybe that's all you can do that day. The good news is tomorrow when you get up, there'll be another $20 bill of creativity
Yep.
there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've never heard that before, but it makes plenty of sense, because yeah, you're always going to have that creative energy. You may spend it, but it's always going to
Yeah,
reload. Yeah.
exactly. And
Make it
so what
trigger.
happened, that gave me a lot of peace when I finally realized that. Like some days, I just can't write because I'm doing something else.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm not doing anything. I'm working on someone else's music or working on promotion or whatever. And then that's what you're doing that day. That's what your $20 bill is spent on. But before that, I used to kind of beat myself up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you being more productive? And then after a while, you're like, hey, actually, I am being pretty productive.
Yeah.
Just not in the way I expected to be productive.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've got kind of a lot of things that you do. You've got your hat in, or your hat. You wear many hats, I guess, is where I'm going with that one. You play music, you teach music, you produce music. Um, what's the clinician thing? I was trying to figure that. I was looking through your website and I was trying to figure out what that was all about. So we'll kind of start with that one first.
Through my life, and this is an important thing for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Your life, doors open in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you choose to walk through the doors, sometimes you don't. One day I was like the guy in my town in upstate New York. Then one day this guy came up to me and said, "Hey, I work for this guitar company. We're looking for guys to play guitar for us,
Mm-hmm.
and you're amazing. They're going to bring in like a whole bunch of different people, and we'll see what happens." But I was just the last guy standing, so I started working. I would get paid to go out and play guitar for different companies at music stores, colleges, and then at things like the NAMM show or Music Mesa or any of these other giant, huge music things.
Yeah.
And I made a ton of contacts that way. It was a side door. I didn't expect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But and then all of a sudden I started teaching at the National Guitar Workshop, and they were like, "Hey, you want to write a book?" I'm like, "Well, I've never wrote a book before. I'll try it, sure." And because I have weird, big, huge, hairy hands. They're like, in the book, they had this guy with super long hair, very skinny guy with huge, giant, long fingers. I'm like, even in books, it matters what you look like.
Yeah.
But that was the '90s.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. When I was kind of looking through it, when I saw like, I was kind of looking through your website and I saw the clinician thing, and I thought it had to do something with using music as healing, like a
I
healing.
actually, I actually have been doing that for many years, working
Okay.
with at-risk kids. So, in other
Oh,
words, there's a facility here in Austin called Phoenix Academy, and I got a call one day from a guy who used to study with me years ago, and he said, "I don't know if you remember me, but we have this studio here in Austin, and it's just been sitting there empty for a couple of years." I'm like, I know about it because I set the studio up. A friend of mine asked me to set the studio up. He's
mhm.
like, "Well, you know anybody that'll come and help us get a program together for these kids?" These are all teenagers that in other words, if you get in trouble, you can either go to juvenile or you can go there, try to straighten out your life, and so if you finish the program, they'll expunge your record and you have a clean record anyway. So, and that's one of the things they can do to express themselves there. So I said, of course, I'd love to do that. And so I've recorded over 400 songs for those kids now,
Mhm.
and it's mostly hip hop, and it's they're dealing with stuff they're going through. But it taught me a lot about that life is not really about me. As a
Yeah.
musician, when you're coming up and you're growing up, you're very, very self-focused because you're trying to make things work. You're trying to make a career out of music and everything. And then at a certain point, you're like, you know what? I was never comfortable. I mean, I have a ton of albums out and I've always done this stuff, but I was never comfortable being the guy. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I'm just like, I don't have that kind of personality where you have to like constantly qualify yourself and everything to people and explain to people why they should be impressed with you. I just could never do that. I didn't
Yeah.
have the stomach for it. So when I started working with the kids, I was like, man, this feels a lot more real to me, and it feels like it's something important. Giving back.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. You gotta like one thing that we do on this podcast, and we'll definitely be doing it a little bit later, is we like to pass on knowledge to younger musicians. And so
Absolutely.
just, building a legacy and passing on information, because you never know, there might be some little kid that wants to learn how to play banjo or something, just might
Just so
want to learn.
if I can mention it, I have several different YouTube channels that have completely free music videos on it for educational videos. Six String Ranch, our YouTube channel there has over 35 or I think maybe 45 videos now about how to play guitar, how to play harmonica, how to do all this stuff. It's completely free. There's no signups. And then we started Four String Ranch for bass players.
Mhm.
So about 20 of those. And then I went down to Mexico to play a festival down there, and a former student of mine he basically explained to me that there's very little Spanish language education. So I brought him up, and we did 10 videos in Spanish, and that's
Mhm.
called Rancho de las Seis Cuerdas, Six String Ranch in Spanish, and so I've always been really, really about that sharing knowledge.
Awesome. And so that's been something you've been doing your entire, like, well, not obviously not like the YouTube videos, but passing on knowledge and things you pick up. That's kind of been your motto your entire life.
I don't have children, but I'm a great great grand teacher. So in other words, I have students who have students who have students.
Mm.
So and
Nice.
so I've been teaching for about, I guess, 40 years now.
Hmm.
And it's something I believe in very, very much. And really, it actually is a secret weapon for any musician trying to learn. If you teach someone else, when you're explaining to someone what they got to do, you're like, oh, I got to do that. I got to make sure I do that too. Or you're always like maybe one page ahead in the book than
Yeah.
they are if you're teaching them how to read music, things
It
like
it
that.
it kind of keeps you humble and um like learn knowing the basics and refreshing the basics at, just like like it just kind of keeps you humble because I remember when I like this is a little bit of a odd comparison, but like just growing up through general education, like just trying to do my math homework in the second grade and like, or just trying to do the random math problems that my dad was like, I haven't done this in forever, and just, yeah.
You're
So
always learning. I think teaching is one of the best ways to learn.
mhm,
Because I'm self-taught. I never went to school or anything. I just basically been self-taught, and so for me, it was always like I realized that you have to remember what it's like not to understand something.
mhm,
You have to remember what it's like. So many times we try to give information based on how we were taught it, but you have to remember we are always assuming that someone who we're talking to understands what we're talking about.
yeah,
So you have to look at it like, hey, I have no idea what I'm talking about. How am I going to get through? And really, that's also a great life lesson because you have to really, one of the great secrets of communication is never to figure out how, never make someone come to your level. Always go to their level. Communicate
mhm,
with someone at their level. They can't possibly know as much about a particular subject as you do when you've been doing it for so much longer. And if you can get yourself out of the way of that and start to listen, I think you
mm,
become a much better person in
yeah,
general.
yeah. When it comes to teaching music, from your perspective, like what do you think is like the commonly one of the common things that it's hard for students to understand or to initially get the grasp of?
I think it's just the mechanics of things.
Okay.
And the thing about is really important is the why.
Hmm.
Why are you doing this? When someone wants to study with me, I'll always say, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to be able to play in a band? Do you want to write songs and record your songs? Do you want to just, be able to have some more knowledge, and
Hmm.
then, or do you want to just learn some songs and have some fun? Because there's all kinds of different ways to approach that.
Yep.
And the great thing about it, like I always explain to people, if you're going to move to France, you need to learn how to speak French. So if
Hmm.
you understand how music works, it's not necessarily you have to read it, but if you understand how it works, that's what everybody's talking about. There's
Hmm.
always this thing like, what are they talking about? But it's always really simple. Everyone just uses different terminology. I'm sorry, I'm prattling on over here.
No, you're good. You're doing perfect. So how many instruments would you say you know how to play? Pretty
I play about 14 instruments,
okay.
and but you have to remember I'm 61 years old now, and I've been doing
Hmm.
this since I was 10, and I've always been a professional musician. I've never had j- a a, a job. I've
Yeah.
never had. I was just messing around there, but I've never had to have a job. I've always made my living playing music, both professionally and then teaching, and then also any number of different ways. I work with a lot of companies as a consultant, musical instrument companies on design and stuff, and
Hmm.
just in general, I've been doing this with different aspects of how to make a living. I was like, well, again, what I said about before, there's always doors that open up in front of you. And if you're smart and you can see the doors that open up, and if you go through the right doors, then you'll always be okay.
Yeah. So the real question that I have, do you know how to play violin?
No,
Fiddle. No? Okay.
I should. Let me explain to you why. I mean, I've been playing. I play slide guitar. I've been
Yeah.
playing slide guitar for years. I play mandolin. I play a lot of other that are
Yeah.
tuned the same way. It's the bowing technique that
Okay.
drives me crazy because the bowing technique, and when I, like I know where to put my fingers. I know how to form the different things. And of course, I've been playing this stuff for years, but it's the bow. I can't just get past it. I sound like someone's little brother trying to learn how to play the violin, and I'm like, okay, you got to pick your battles with
Yeah.
music. You can't be good at everything, so you just try to specialize in what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. That the reason I ask is because I've been trying to get up the courage to learn how to play the fiddle. The first major hurdle is I need to get a left-handed fiddle, and those are a lot more rare and a lot more expensive if you can find them. Yeah, from what I get, or from what I guess, it's goes back to like the orchestral days and everything being kind of um, or
Symmetrical.
symmetrical. There you go. And so like if you try and play left-handed, they'll beat it out of you so you can play right-handed.
I
So
thought, well, I mean, there's lots of different ways to, I failed music theory in high school, not because the teacher wasn't good, but because they never related it to what I was interested in, and the terminology.
yeah,
So, and that kind of thing about music being militaristic rather than something that's super creative, it has to be fun. That's why they call it playing music. They call it playing music. They don't call get hit on the hammer, your hand with a ruler. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Playing music sounds fun.
yeah,
Work. They don't call it working music. They call it playing music.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why really wanted to pick up, or I really want to pick up the fiddle and learn how to play, is because when we go out to like these bluegrass music festivals, or we go out to these festivals, every night around the campfire,
Oh, I
what
learned
happened?
a lot. I learned a lot at those festivals in upstate New York
Yeah,
where I'm from. We would go to those, and I would sneak into them, and I would play all night long, and just pick up a ton of songs. I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah,
That there's very few things that are more fun than playing music with human beings,
yeah,
other human
absolutely.
beings.
Yeah, and it's just really amazing to watch. Like, there's this bluegrass festival we go down to in the Florida Keys, and Saturday night is the pick and jam session. Like, they dedicate an entire night that's all they do. And so you walk in, and like there's usually one or two guys that are kind of running the jam session or whatever, calling out songs and what have you. But people just kind of jump in and out all night, and it's just like really amazing, just kind of watching how the natural progression of music and the growth
So
is.
you'll notice one of the things that are really important, for example, when you watch those jam sessions, I always tell people who want to start playing with other people, just go watch it because, for example, if you go to a blues jam session, there are songs that are always called, and when you go to the bluegrass jam session, there are songs that they're going to call, Salty Dog or
Yeah,
Mountain Dew or any of the other millions of bluegrass songs that there are. Every genre has its standards, so if
yeah,
you can just like start to get a handle on a few of those standards, then you can go and you have common ground with someone.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um so I want to let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your music, because you did something kind of interesting, so much to the point that I thought it was a typo. You released a whole bunch of music back in September 11th. You released 8 albums. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So,
So, what's kind of the story behind that, and why did you release 8?
uh, for many, many years, as I told you, I traveled and I would put out an album a year. So I have 18 albums out now. So
Okay.
all together. So I started to work. As I told you before, I spent a lot of time working on other people's music and helping people, uh, kind of help people. What I do here at Six String Ranch, just really briefly,
Yeah.
is I help people learn how to play, learn how to write, uh, and then teach them how to record their stuff and then recording. So I also teach Logic and a bunch of other things too. I teach people how to get stuck with their things. People need, what I've always done is I've always taught people when they play to write music. For example, they're like, well, what am I going to write about? I'll be like, well, do you have kids? And they'll be like, sure, I have kids. I'm like, write songs for your children's children that you'll never see. Try to write, put your knowledge down. They're like, that's a great idea. So people start to do that, and what happens is it becomes this engine. So I end up doing probably 10 or 12 albums a year that aren't mine.
Hmm.
So I'm always working, plus with other artists that come in and different songwriters and stuff that work with me. And, so the whole idea is I spend a lot of time working on other people's music. I can't always write. I love to write, and obviously I've written a ton of songs, and I'm not super prolific. There was an old saying, I think, that well, you need time to dream. If
Hmm.
you're gonna be creative, you need time to dream. I can't just be working all the time. So when I have time, I'll write, especially when I have something to say. Over the last 4 years, and to be fair, I'm a New York Democrat. That's where my political leanings go, and so I've had a lot of stuff. I've had a lot of very strong feelings about, for example, immigration, how we've become increasingly isolated and increasingly narcissistic as a society, and those are things that really bother me, and I don't know if I'm sure it's not healthy for a society in general. And I have a lot of friends who are Republicans, and I don't, I'm not a militant anything. I
Hmm.
don't believe in fundamentalism of any sort, really. So I had a lot to say with this record. At the same time, so that was Being Human. So Being Human is a lot about observations of like who really, the bottom line is who really cares what I think. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So, when people make albums like this, I dealt with aspects of love, death, depression, uh, narcissism, a lot of really strong things that I had something to say. I've always uh, tried to be very, very clear about what I want to say in a song. There has to be a reason to say stuff. There's a lot of people who just make music. They write a song and they're like, I wrote a song, I'm going to record it. You know, you don't, I don't necessarily think that's good either. So I've written thousands of songs,
Hmm.
and most of them never get heard because I'm writing through them to get to the ones I like.
Hmm.
When I have a collection of songs that I think are worthwhile, then I'll make an album.
Hmm.
So I had this album finally finished this up after really really thinking a lot about the lyrics and everything else. And I also a few years back when my I moved to Texas because my mom and dad retired here, as I said, and my dad passed a few years back. And there's always this guitar. It was the very first guitar I ever played. It was a tiny little guitar, and my mom used to play it, and I put my knee on her leg and listened to her play when I was a very young boy, and it was my very first guitar. And it hung in my parents' living room above the fireplace for many many years, and I would always take it down and look at it. The strings were really high, and they had nylon strings, and the strings were an inch off the neck. And then when my dad passed, but I knew it was a really old guitar. I didn't know what it was, but it kind of looked like a super old Martin. It was a parlor guitar, and I'll explain
Hmm.
in a second. Very small guitar. And so when my dad passed, my mom gave me the guitar. I brought it and had it completely restored. And I said, "What is this?" And they said, "This is a Thompson and Ordell, which is a guitar made in Boston, Massachusetts in the 1890s." And I'm like, "Wow." And so I said, "String it very lightly. I want to put steel strings on it instead of nylon." And when I got it back, it was my great great grandfather's guitar, my grandfather's guitar, my father's guitar, and now it's my guitar. So I recorded it, sat down and recorded an album. The idea with that guitar was one man, one guitar, one take.
Hmm.
So it's just fingerstyle instrumental music. It's stuff I've been doing for years and years, which is just fingerstyle guitar. And so that became Parlor. So I had that album ready. At the same time, I had two live albums in the can. I mixed them like three times until I liked them. One with a band that I had from the last album I had done called Matt Smith's World, and I recorded that live at the Saxon Pub in Austin.
Hmm.
Then another album with this great experimental trio I had called Chop Shop. And Chop Shop was myself, Ed Friedland, who's now with the Mavericks, and Brian Austin, who's a great drummer in town here who plays with David Grissom a lot when they're playing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
just great musician anyway. So we did an album, and that album was about basically song-based improvisation, kind of like taking the concepts of a heavy-duty jazz band and applying it to rock and pop songs. So the song starts, it can go anywhere. The great thing about a trio, it's like a little sports car. The more
Mhm.
instruments you have in a band, the more careful you have to be.
Yeah.
But just have like bass, drums, and a guitar or a mandolin or lap steel, whatever I was playing with it. You could take it out into outer space, and it was fair game. And if you have great musicians, it becomes clairvoyant, and you can make this amazing experience. So I recorded about 30 shows of that, and took the best songs of that, and put that in Chop Shop Live at Strange Brew, which is a club here in Austin that passed a while ago as well. Then last year, I re released all 10 of my previous albums. And so I thought the other good thing that would be great to do is to, instead of making people listen to 10 albums, is to put together a career retrospective. So
Hmm.
1988 to 2020. That's what the other four records are.
Oh wow. Staying. So the you when did you kind of start the process of putting all these records together? Obviously, it's took some time, but when did you kind of start the
Oh,
process of
I've
that?
had them. I always, even now, I probably have 6 or 7 albums that I've. It's just what happens is, as a creative person, the person that was you 10 years ago is no longer the person you are now.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that you thought about, the things that were important to you, change a lot through time. And also you mature, and what's important to you changes. And so the songs you wrote 10 years ago are, you should just leave them alone. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So in other words, I already I picked the ones that I had recorded off those other 10 records and put
Yeah.
them together. But the ones I like the best, the ones
Yeah.
that I looked at all the records. I said, if I were going to pick 3 songs or 2 songs off of one record, which ones would you pick to represent that particular period? Because I always looked at albums like being a photograph of you
Hmm.
that year. It's like a photograph of you that year.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, it's not going to change the world. You know what I mean? The bottom. This is the bitter truth of it, and I always discuss this with the people who I work with. I'm like, this is the tough part of this. Is like, no one will ever care about your music as much as you do, and your
Hmm.
mom. You know what I mean? Or and the other people in your band and everything. Of course, we care very deeply about it, but you know how you listen to music. Like, this is great. I love this song. I also love this song over here. And then I'm
Hmm.
going to listen. Oh, there's a new song over here. So we're always consuming things one after another. That's why streaming has become so huge and such a great idea. You don't have to own that. You don't have to
Hmm.
own, you don't have to carry around this giant sack of stuff like you used to have to do.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
guess that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, but then I don't I think there's kind of becoming a research, like just kind of going back on that. I It's really interesting that we're starting to see in this like big technology boom where everything's getting a lot easier, and like streaming and like the iPhone, like your iPhone, all that stuff. You're starting to just see a resurgence back to hard form media, where now vinyl's making a comeback. Cassette tapes are making a comeback for some reason. Like,
Yeah, no, I think what it is it's been proven that digital media is there are things about it, and it has a lot to do with conversion.
mhm,
In other words, you know about conversion. You're an engineer, so if you have, for example, if you buy an interface that costs $120 and it's got
mhm,
like 2 preamps in it and the converters and everything and a headphone input and all this other stuff, it's the problem is the conversion is just not going to sound very good, and the conversion is the most important part because
yeah,
that's the stuff that turns the zeros into ones back
yeah,
into audio and audio back into the zeros and ones and everything. So that's why some music is painful to listen to because
mhm,
of because it just doesn't have. I used to explain it to people like, why doesn't my music sound good? And I'd go, well, because your converter is really cheap. Look at it this way: have you ever tried to sip a drink through one of those drink stirring straws with the two tiny little holes in it? Everyone's done that, but instead of just opening up your mouth and drinking the drink, it's that difference and
yeah,
over, you know. And so there's a lot of kind of differences in why vinyl sounds better. and why
Mm-hmm.
purely analog sounds better. Now, the other thing about it is most musicians can't afford tape. A
Mm-hmm.
reel of 2-inch tape costs $200 and gives you
Yep.
15 minutes, of time. You can't do 8 million takes of that song with that,
No.
unless you got a ton of money. So digital recording is really leveled the playing field as far as how we get music out and
Mm-hmm.
how we appear. But it's not quite obviously as it doesn't sound as good. It doesn't have that warm, fuzzy feeling. And the other thing about it, and I know I'm sorry if I'm dominating the conversation,
Nope.
but
You're good. Keep going.
the other thing about this is that the loss of the album listening experience.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a series of music, like for example, Being Human was put together as kind of a concept.
Mm-hmm.
And it deals one song deals with love, one song deals with death, one song deals with my issues with addiction, another song deals with like sanctuaries about immigration and the hypocrisy of how everyone in this country is an immigrant, yet we always demonize the latest wave.
Mm-hmm.
What coming in? We don't want those people. All the other waves that came before, they're here already, but not this one. And that's the way it's always been in this country.
Yeah.
But yet we are a nation of immigrants. So those kind of things that I put it together like to kind of like be that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
just an old man spouting off.
No, it, that's the one thing I really do enjoy about vinyl though is it forced musicians to tell a complete story within that vinyl because you can't I mean if you're really good you can skip songs on vinyl but you're going to over skip and you're going to end up in the middle of the just like all this stuff but listening to vinyl you it like you'd mentioned it's a experience from beginning to end, A side to B side.
It would take you somewhere and
Yeah.
keep you, and you would have this experience based on it. The other thing about that is that at that point there was so little media when vinyl was big the first time. There was so little media that you would listen to an album from start to finish, and you'd
Mhm.
land or you'd listen to the headphones on your bed. You just listen, then the side would be over. You'll be like, oh, I gotta go, gotta get up and turn the side over.
Yeah.
But it also would have this very very strong image of a particular time and place in your life. It was the
Mhm.
soundtrack to your life,
Mhm.
and and that started to go when MTV started, where instead of having and this is still really old. We're talking about really old, but also for me, it's the pathway on why it's coming back. So when MTV started, instead of having these really really vital memories that you saw a
Mm.
stupid video,
Yeah.
and then as that faded, it became more and more about image and everything else. And people are like, well, I mean, I don't look like this person, and I'll never look like this person. I like the guys with the flannel shirts and everything else. And then so there was a reaction to that. Now, what's happening now as music becomes realer and realer and realer and more, more sanitized and auto tuned and
Yeah.
everything else and gridded and all the beats are gridded, it starts to lose a sense of realness.
Mhm.
Like that's not what you go hear when you go to the bar and see your buddy's band
Yeah.
playing. You know what I mean? That's not what you see.
Yep. Yep. Not at all. Not at all. I will say though, the one reason I got back into collecting vinyl is yes, I enjoy actually listening to the vinyl, but for me, it's all about that cover art.
Oh yeah, I love cover art. What amazing work! This is the other thing is before artists were so strongly associated with bands.
Mhm.
There were you could just an album cover and go, I know exactly what band that is just from the artwork.
Mhm.
Even if it was
Yeah.
an album you've never heard before.
Yeah. It's just kind of it's got a certain look, it's got a certain feel. I've just recently started reforming a vinyl collection because I inherited my mom's when I was younger, and then it got to a point where her record player didn't work. So it's like, well, we got all this vinyl, we don't really have anywhere to go, and so it just ended up getting sold in a garage sale. Um, and then now it's just kind of like I don't even remember what all was in the collection, but I'm sure she had some gems because my mom is 64. She listened to the Beatles, the Monkees. So, I'm sure she had some gems in there that were probably worth keeping in the or in the long term.
Well, sure. And also, I mean, it was vinyl was always something that, it had to have like the technical aspects of it.
Hmm.
Vinyl had to have, you could only put so much time on a vinyl record because if the grooves were too small, it wouldn't give you the right amount of bass coming out of the speakers and stuff like that. It was really interesting, the theory behind vinyl and why they can only put, I think it's 17 minutes on the side or something.
Hmm. Depending on which RPM, or if you get a 33 or a 45 or a 33. Yeah.
And also, you had to have special preamps for those. I mean, you
Hmm.
couldn't just plug it in, like obviously with a, you remember when you had to be sure you had a receiver. You couldn't just plug it into your, and it had special inputs on the receiver that you have to put it in there so it has enough power to drive the very low output that comes out of the needle.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, since you're a musician that seems to always kind of be writing and in that creative zone, what's kind of your process when you sit down, or when you well, not necessarily sit down to write music, but like what's kind of your creative process?
I've always played music. For me, it was always in service to writing.
Hmm.
The first thing I ever did when I picked up the guitar and learned a couple of chords was write a song with those three chords. And then if I learned a new chord, I'd write a new song with that new chord. Because for me, it was always about that. And then when I learned a new technique, or I would discover things. When you're first starting to play, everything is so intimidating and so, like, for example, right now, we'll talk about your experience looking at playing the fiddle, for example. So
Yeah,
right now, you're looking at playing the fiddle, and you've been to all these bluegrass, and you've seen these virtuosic fiddle players, and
yeah,
you're like, I'll never be able to play like that. But you don't
yeah.
have to play like that
No.
because what you do is you start with really simple things that you can do. It's if you can find, for example, either on YouTube or in person, the right person to guide you,
Hmm.
then it makes the whole thing so much easier because there's a plan. Right now, you're like, I would love to play fiddle, but that is an abstract concept.
Yeah,
So, and then you're like, okay, I want to play fiddle like, this style of fiddle, so I
yeah,
want to play bluegrass fiddle, which involves all these different things. So you got to learn the different bowing
yeah,
techniques and the double stops and all the other stuff within the fiddle.
yeah.
And then you're like, well, how do I improvise? Because that's a big part of bluegrass
Mm.
is the idea of improvising.
Yeah.
You asked me before about a little word of advice for any young aspiring musician, and my biggest thing is it's really obvious. You and I are talking right now with our voices.
Yeah.
You play the fiddle and you start finding little notes and you start playing little scales and everything. Sing the notes as you play them because you relate to the whole world with your voice. It makes really perfect sense. For example, when someone's learning how to improvise, I'll say, look, just sing the notes that you're playing. That's how you're going to know what's going to come out of your instrument. Otherwise, it's completely abstract. It's like it's over there, you're over here. You connect to your instrument through singing along with it.
Oh well. Yeah. That yeah, I would have never thought of that.
The amazing thing, Tom, is that a lot of things with music seems like this weird, mysterious thing, but it actually is just what you do every day. It's no different. And
Mhm.
you start to realize that music, all aspects of music, it all comes from the same place. It all comes from the same place in you. Your ability to sing, your ability to write, your ability to improvise, your ability to do any of this thing. It all comes from the same place. We always try to think that things are compartmentalized, but they're not. They're all part of the same thing. And that is really reassuring when you start to realize that the concept of singing is the same thing. There's two things that happen when you sing with your instrument.
Mhm.
One, you're going to start to know what's going to come out of your instrument when you when you put your fingers a certain place. You're going to know what sound will be there. Two, you'll become a better singer
Yeah.
because you have something to compare your pitch to.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that you had brought up earlier, we were talking about Um, we were talking about the hardest thing that you feel it is for musicians to learn when they're just starting to learn how to play music, and you'd mentioned it was the why certain thing, or the mechanics and the why. And that was something that I struggled with, and still not still technically, but like when I first told myself, okay, I'm gonna learn how to play fiddle, and I was trying to figure out the why. And
You answered your own question when you said, "I want to be able to play at bluegrass jams."
yeah,
That's the why.
well, that's the big why. But then I started like really thinking about it, and it's whenever we go to these festivals and we talk to musicians, whenever I go on these podcasts, or whenever I go to, we do the solo acoustic sessions, whatever we do, my audio engineer and the production, like the third member of our team, they're both musicians. They can relate with every musician that we go to or work with. And here I am. I don't play any instruments. So I'm just kind of like, oh, hey, I'm the guy you've been talking to for the last 6 months, and I want to be able to at least, I want to learn the basics and kind of understand and connect with music on the same level that all these people that we work with kind of do as well.
There's a language that all musicians use, and it's based on, and I'm just going to explain this to you really quick because all of this becomes ridiculously complicated when
Yeah.
it's. So here's what it is. The only thing anyone ever says when they're talking about music is talking about the major scale, either
Mm-hmm.
the notes of any major scale or the chords of the key that are built from that major scale. So, for example, someone will go, "Oh, it's a 1-6-2-5 progression." That means the first, sixth, second, and fifth chord of that key. If you understand how to find that, and it's really, really simple. It's ridiculously
Yeah.
simple. And if I don't want to get into a music theory lesson with you, but it's ridiculously simple. And the I mean, I guess I don't know if we want to get into that because I could certainly tell you about it.
Yeah.
Uh, but we may
Next time I'm down in Austin, we'll sit down.
talk about it.
I I I can't tell what you're drinking. I can only assume it is
It's a Waterloo.
it's a water. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the thing. Oh, I'm
Oh,
not a drinker. That's
yeah.
I've never been a drinker. I
It
got
it it looked like a bush light or something. I was like, okay.
it's a and it's not that it's because I have too much stuff going on.
Yeah.
And whenever I would drink, it would knock me out for the next day. I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, I feel like crap, and I just got too much stuff to do. So
Yeah.
that's for me. And it's not like I have an alcohol problem or anything. It just was never my a vice of choice, shall I
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. I got you. Completely under.
So anyway, there's it's not like I'm vice free. That's
Yeah.
just not my vice.
Yeah.
Anyway, the whole idea with for me is uh, music
Yeah.
and the satisfaction I get from it. It was never for me about fame. It was about seeking greatness, seeking the potential of what I'm able to do through learning more and more about
Mm.
things. I'm endlessly fascinated with everything about it, every single aspect of it. That's why I play so many different instruments. That's why I learn so many different styles. That's why I'm always learning about new things, not just about this, but about the technology of it, everything, the whole idea of it, so that I can pass it on.
Hmm. Absolutely. So you'd mentioned, or we're gonna kind of transition, but I'm gonna use this question to use it as the transition.
Okay.
So you'd mentioned earlier you play 14 instruments.
Mhm.
Which one is the most, or the toughest yet most enjoy? It's tough, but you enjoy playing it. Like, does that question make sense?
I'd say the main one I play, which is the guitar. The
Okay.
guitar is it's any instrument can be gone into as deeply as you choose. It's not just that. So, say for example, you're going to learn how to play fingerstyle. I always tell people you have your right hand is a full 50% of your available hands. So you should learn how to use it, as well as your left hand when you're playing everything. And then the other thing I always say is that 90% of the time you're playing rhythms. You're
Mm.
playing accompaniment. You're not playing solos. But most guitar players just work on their solos endlessly and don't work on playing interesting accompaniments. For me, I'm going to tell you something, and about the way I look at guitar and the way I spent many, many years as a session musician in New York City. So I get a call. They'd be like, "Hey, do you know somebody that can play banjo?" And they're like, "Yeah, call this guy." And I get a call, and I come in with my banjo, and I do the track for the producer, and he'd go, "That's great. Next time we need another banjo player, we'll call you." And I'd be like, "Well, that's actually like my eighth instrument,
Yeah.
the instruments that I like to play." But sure, go ahead. I'm happy to, whatever it is. For me, it was always challenging, looking for new challenges, looking for new things to expand into. Uh, did I just completely leave the subject that you were talking about?
Nope. You're right where I wanted. You're
Uh,
right where we're
great.
talking about.
I got you right
You
where
you you used the word that I was trying to get out of my extremely tired because I've been doing political coverage all day for my day job
I.
since 7 a.m. yesterday.
Yeah,
So
sure.
you used the word that I was trying to put out there. But
Which was?
continue.
Which was?
Challenge. Which
Yeah.
instrument do you find the most challenging?
Every instrument has its great masters, right?
Yeah.
For me, if I learn a new instrument, whatever instrument it is,
Yeah.
for example, it could be the baglama, which is a Persian, it's an Iraqi instrument that I've been toying with. All of these things I'll never, or for example, the sitar or uh, any of these other instruments, the cavaquinho or the mandolin or dobro or any of these other instruments. Uh, there are great masters of those. So what I would always do if I was going to learn an instrument, I would immerse myself in the great masters of that instrument.
Mhm.
You, for example, with the fiddle, is just listen to great fiddle players over and over and over, and then start to figure out what they're doing. You know what I mean? And the great thing is there's so many videos, you can just watch somebody do it and kind of say, "Oh, that's how they do it," and then try it and go,
Yeah.
"I don't get it yet." Just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And everything becomes easier and easier as you do it. But for me, it was never about mastering all these instruments. It was about making them do what I wanted them to do.
Mhm.
So, and there's an amazing thing. I've written a bunch of books, and I have my book is called Matt Smith's Chop Shop, and that's my main book that I always steer people to because it has the way I teach. In there, there's a thing called the secret of everything, and
Mhm.
the secret of everything just explains really simply how music works and how you can come up with how you can control your own music. You know what I mean? How you can do things, and it's really understanding that there's a universe. For example, open tunings. If you learn one open tuning, you actually learn five tunings.
Mhm.
Like if you learn D tuning, it's the same as E tuning on a guitar. If you move everything you just learned down one string towards the floor, you get G and A tuning. If you move everything you just played another string towards the floor, then you get C tuning. That means I don't have to keep relearning the entire guitar. I just learn it once and I can play in five tunings. Now, many, many instruments are tuned to a chord. So if I can play in G tuning, I can also play banjo, cavaquinho, all these trace, all these different instruments that are tuned with the exact same relationship between the strings.
Mhm.
And so when you do that, and then it's a matter of learning how the instrument is supposed to be played instead of playing it like a guy who just picked it up and is playing it like a guitar player.
Yeah.
Instead of really learning the techniques involved in the instruments. That's the challenge of it.
Okay. Perfect. And this is all stuff that you go over in the six string ranch as an instructor, and this is a lot of the stuff that you talk about on the daily.
There's only what I come up with an idea and I make a series of videos on it. Like
Okay.
a whole series of videos on the lap steel guitar. Did a whole other series of videos on how to improvise an electric guitar. Sometimes it's just different instruments, sometimes it's different techniques. And so for me, it's I've never believed in one of the main issues with you trying to learn something on YouTube, like for example, I look for something, I have a question, and I
Hmm.
look for something on YouTube, and I have to wade through 4 minutes of crap before it gets to the little tiny bit I needed to know, because people teach way too much stuff in a video. All I
Hmm.
want to know is the thing I want to know. Just concentrate on that, single focus, and then go from there. I've always tried to teach, and I always tried to produce, and I always tried to write the way I would want. For example, as a teacher, I always try to teach the way I would want someone to teach me. When someone comes to work with me in the studio as an artist, I always treat them the way I would want to be treated.
Mm.
Never condescending, always with great empathy and care, and trying to understand what they want. And
Mhm.
listen. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
just listen.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and so as far as the production aspect of things, how long have you been you produce your own music as well as other musicians,
Yeah.
correct? How long have you been doing that? Right.
Oh boy, probably 30 years now.
Okay.
Both in New York City and here in Austin.
Gotcha. And is that something that you always wanted to know how to do, or was it just something that you started picking up as you were playing music and gaining experience recording your music through other studios?
I would always ask questions at the studio. I would watch, and a lot of times before I started mixing records, I would work with great engineers. So I would produce because musically, I know exactly what I want to hear, and I know how to get what I want out of someone's song, and hopefully they want too. I mean, this is a collaborative process, and but I would go to the studio and I would watch someone mix, and then eventually I would be telling them what I wanted them to do. And at that point, I started doing it myself. And it always starts the same way. For you, the same thing. I'm just going to buy a mic.
Hmm.
Just gonna buy one mic, and then I'm just going to, get a little interface, and I'm going to start doing podcasts. Then pretty soon you're like, well, I need a better mic, and I need a
Yeah.
better interface, and now I need a better camera for my computer.
Yep.
It's a very slippery slope, and before
Oh, oh, it is.
before
It
you know
really
it,
is.
it's out of control.
Live and Amplified started just kind of like I already had some okay camera equipment because I was a filmmaker for
Oh, I
years.
Googled you. I researched you.
Yeah. And then, it just kind of once we started launching the idea of live and amplified, it's like go to my engineering buddy. It's like, hey, I want to do this. What mics do you need to help me kind of make this work? And he's like, well, I've got the Shure 58s. Those are industry standard and pretty versatile. We can make them work for just about anything we want them to work. I'm like, okay, cool. And so like the first session is nothing but a bunch of Shure 58s just kind of miking an acoustic guitar and some vocals. And I'm like, all right, cool. And then we jumped way way up a notch, and after the third like session or after the second session we went and did a full metal band, and it's like, hey, we don't have enough inputs on your Zoom H6, we need to go
No,
get like an entire interface, and we need a drum kit mic, and we need like all these mics. So if you really want to go do this session, we need to get some mics and an interface really quick. And it's like, okay, let's go. And yeah,
no. This is how you. This is it's that's a classic. That's how most people start. You start with like, and then what happens? You're like, why does my recording sound like shit? You're like,
yeah,
well, because you have crappy mics and you have a crappy interface. Oh, so I need better mics and a better interface, and now I need better speakers and better
yep,
headphones,
yep,
and now I need more channels because a band's coming in,
yeah,
and then you're like, now I need a whole bunch more better microphones, and
yep,
then I need a headphone system so the band can hear themselves when they're playing,
yeah,
and then you're like, and before you know it, you're like, oh, now I need a 32 channel
yeah,
interface and so I can have my summing mixer and all. It never stops, and
yeah,
and then there's the whole thing like, oh, now my computer is too old to run the software that I need to run, so now I need to get a whole new computer, and then it's a constant upgrading. But also, uh, I love this stuff. I never get bored. And even sometimes when I'm at the studio all day, when I'm working in the studio all day, it's like what you'll do. You'll go home and then you'll work editing video all day. Then you'll come home and you'll edit some more video because you want to,
yep,
not because you have to. And
yeah,
so the same thing with me. Like I have immense amounts of software that I have to learn all the time. Like all these sample libraries for when I'm doing orchestrations or other things like, oh, I have to learn how to do this. I don't understand why something went. Then, and the other half of it is what just happened and how do I fix it? How do I have so there's that thing too. That's the other issue. Like, why did my whole studio just go? What happened?
Yeah.
and I can't not be ready. I have to fix it. So you fix it. You know as well as I do. You spend a lot of time figuring out what just went wrong.
Yep. Absolutely. I always, always,
That's
always.
and that's a whole other set of skill sets. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Not enough just to be a musician. You also have to be a technician, and you have
Yep.
to understand. And then, as a producer, you also have to be a psychiatrist,
Yep.
and a babysitter, and be super encouraging and empathetic and understand.
Yep.
You got to step out of your own way. You got
Yep.
to get out of your ego.
Yep. Absolutely. You really, really do, because it's like working with musicians, recording them, they're really like they're making themselves so vulnerable and they're really self-conscious about what they're doing. And you have to reassure them, like, hey, you think you messed up. It sounds great. And then you have to go and prove it. Like, you definitely have to go and prove it and show them, like, hey, you didn't mess up, but you've got to like wear all these hats. You got to be the producer, you got to be a technician, because if the interface starts melting down or the mics start acting up or the XLR cable, like, I can't tell you how many times we throw or how many XLR cables we throw away a year just because they go. Like, as well as anybody, XLR
But
cables just
what it
go.
is, what it is, all of this is uh, preparation,
Yep.
and be prepared, like, and understanding what can happen and what does happen, and then also simplifying your setup. Like right now, you do this every day.
Hmm.
All you got to do is sit down, turn on your computer, and you're ready to go. You don't have to worry about because you're not tearing it down every day.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's different if you
Yeah.
tore it down every day, like doing a live show.
Yeah.
Then when you're tearing everything down, you're like, oh no, I
Yep.
don't have I don't have an IEC cable from my mixer. Where can I get an IEC cable right now?
Yeah.
Which is the power cable that you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But the listeners, a power cable that plugs into the back of whatever So if you don't
Yep.
have that, or any kind of things that can go wrong, you got to just be. But the amazing thing is, you only do that once. It's like
Yeah.
not saving what's on your hard drive. You know what I mean? It's not saving your session or not saving what
Yeah.
you're doing. You only do that once.
Yeah. And then you learn. You
Yeah,
never
you
do
learn the hard way. And
it.
I guess anyway, I don't mean to keep
No,
monopolizing.
you're though. I will say though, like, just kind of the one thing that we continually lose, and it drives me, or there's two things we continually lose, and it drives me bananas. The 3.5 to quarter inch adapter for the headphones. We lose those constantly. We'll be cleaning out the car, and there'll be six of them sitting at the bottom of the spare tire bin. And it's like, well, we've got them for the next trip now. And then we lose them. And then it's like, okay, go buy more, and so it's just that constant battle. And then the screws, or not the screws, but the bolt thing to tighten up your booms on your mic stands, like the
Oh yeah,
locks. There you go.
invest in I just get really good mic stands. I do. These are things that you realize you can't like get used or cheap things because
Yeah.
especially when you're tightening a mic stand up, the choke just if you have a cheap mic stand, it just doesn't. It's not worth it. Spend an extra $50 and get a good mic stand. The problem is a lot of times if you're working on
I lost you. Oh no, is this me? Oh, please tell me it's. Oh no. Do, 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 do. Okay, it wasn't me. That's good. Let's see if he rejoins. Sorry about that. He's back.
all right, right there.
All right.
That's an edit point right there, Tom.
Yep, it really is. It was
I,
like, oh, he wanted it cut out for a second, and then it didn't.
I don't know. It's just locked up. This is what happens on Zoom calls all the time.
Yeah, it really does. It like our Zoom meetings that I have for work. Every other day, somebody drops out or
Yeah.
pauses mid sentence. But
It's interesting.
um,
Technician explained it to me one time that the internet is not this infinite thing. It's divided by the number of devices that are using it at that location.
yeah,
I never knew,
absolutely. That,
I
that, that makes perfect sense.
never knew that though. I was like, wow,
Yeah,
that does make perfect sense, and why sometimes things are so slow.
yeah.
Like, we're right near UT, and there's like a million people using the internet right now.
Mm,
Anyway,
yeah.
so any other questions you got for me?
Let's jump into the big one. What you've been answering it pretty much the entire night, but what advice do you have for beginner musicians that are ready to take that next step? Like they've been experimenting, they're starting to find their sound, but they're ready to make that next step.
Well,
What?
I think the whole thing is obviously you need to write and record your own music, and a lot of most of this stuff can all be done at home really simply. You have GarageBand and Cubase and all kind, Acid and all kinds of Reason and all kinds of these other things you can do, whether you're making beats or whether you're whatever you're doing. The important thing is you learn by doing. That you can go to school for engineering, you can go to school and learn all this kind of stuff, but you don't really learn what you learn. And you know as well as I do, for example, as a musician, you don't learn anything near as much in your and practicing in your bedroom as you do on stage. One gig is worth 10 practice sessions in your room, because the things that you learn are real world uh, information. When you're recording, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's how you learn. So
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to start to understand how to make things sound good. One of the biggest things I always tell people: everything can't be big. You can't have everything be big. You can't have everything be in stereo. You have to listen to, especially when you're mixing, you have to listen to the whole thing together
Mm-hmm.
and start figuring out what the problem is.
Yeah.
But there's nothing better than just writing and recording your own music. It gives you, especially when you're learning, it gives you a focus for why. Again, the why. Why are you doing this? If you learn how to record by recording, you can sit in your car and read the manual, but until you get behind the wheel and take it on the road, you're not. I know these
Yeah.
are stupid analogies, but the same thing with the recording. You just got to keep doing it, and you get better at it, and you'll find that less is more a lot of times. Less distortion, less reverb, less delay, unless that's what you're going for. Then
Mm,
pile it on. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
no, but there are. I remember once reading very early in my career, reading. I met this. Well, first of all, I'll say this is important. A word of advice for when you're making music. Uh, I went down to New York to have a meeting with an A&R guy,
Yeah.
and he was listening to some of my songs early in my career, and he goes, "What's the best part of your song?" And I was taken aback. I wasn't prepared for the question. I go, "I guess this hook right here." And he looked at me and he goes, "Why isn't the rest of it that good?" Everything has to be the best part of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Every single thing in your song is an opportunity to make it better. Everything should be the best part of the song.
Absolutely. That makes and I think that kind of drives the whole streaming platform that we're in, because every song because everybody's releasing singles right now, everything could be at any point. If you release an album at any point, you could point at any one of those songs and say, okay, that is the best song on the album. That's our lead single. Like that's kind of the mentality a lot of younger musicians are taking now.
Well, to me, it's always like, well, you don't have to make an album anymore. You could just release a long string of singles. The bottom line is that things are based at this point, are you as well as is units of press. You want to get on live and amplified. You want
Mm,
to get the word out. You want to spread the word on things. You want to be able to have people talk about your band and being like, wow, that band's super cool. Why is your band sound cooler than the other band down the road? So and is it because not because you have a better engineer or you have a better guitar or anything, but because your songs are better.
Hmm.
The lyrics got to be great. The guitar hooks have to be great. The beat has to be great. Everything, and the more you can do that, the more you can. It's important. I remember a friend of mine says another sentence to me a long time ago. He goes, "What would you say to you?" Which is brilliant.
Hmm.
Just what would you say to you if you were listening to your song and it wasn't you? What would you say about your song? We get so far deep inside of it that it's really hard for us to stand outside ourselves and listen to what's or make judgments on what could be better in our music. It's so personal. It's such a personal thing. It's like it's my music baby. Don't be talking smack about my music baby.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't want to keep you too much longer. So where could everybody find you online? Where can they find your music, your six string for more information about Six String Ranch, all that fun stuff?
well, you can always find me at sixstringranch.com. My music is under three different things, it's under everything. I have a ton of videos on six string on my new albums, but I'm under Matt Smith, Matt Smith's World, and the Matt Smith Band. So there's three different places to look on, for example, any of your streaming service for the various albums. On my website, sixstringranch.com, there's a whole video channel on there with a ton of free video stuff. Also, we run a lot of events when this thing
It,
disappears, like
yeah,
master classes with famous guitar players and stuff. I do a lot of those here because all these guys I've known over the years and stuff. So they come in and they do master classes for small groups of people. But I can always be reached through Matt at sixstringranch.com if you're interested in Zoom lessons or if you just need some consultant or if you're like, why can't I get Logic to work right? Stuff like that. I do those kind of things anyway. That's
yeah.
how you get in touch with me. And make sure to tell your friends about Live and Amplify. Keep this thing going.
Thank you. Yes, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to talk to you. I hope I was hoping to make it down to Austin a couple of weeks ago because I was going to be in Georgetown, and then I got a phone call from the booking manager for the show that I was going to go to. It's like, hey, have you left? Are you almost here, or have you left? And I was like, I'm leaving now. It's like an hour or whatever to Georgetown. He's like, we're already at capacity, so you could still come and wait and see if somebody leaves, but it's just like, all right, well, I guess I'll stay home. I won't
That's
drive. Yeah,
Anyway, if you do come into town, you have my phone number. Just give me a call and or just email me and I'll send you my number if you don't have it. But
yeah, it should be in the form thing that I have.
just uh, just give me a holler and come on by the studio. You'll be very impressed with what we have here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Studio, studio is completely like we don't advertise. We don't. There's no sign out front.
mhm.
You never know it was there. I do that deliberately, and you'll understand when you come.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's I've been here a year. I haven't been to Austin yet.
Oh man, you got to
I,
come.
I
But the thing is, also, there's really not. I mean, what are you gonna do? You can't really go anywhere. I can't see. There's still, there's nothing really open yet.
yeah,
But this will pass. It'll pass. You know.
it will. Well, we've got a couple of things that we're gonna do in 2021 in the first half, and then the back half we're just kind of like, okay, all gloves are off. We're going places.
Good. You
So
guys got a location.
yeah,
No, excellent. Well, it's a
but
pleasure talking to you. It was great to meet you.
yep, great to meet you as well.